All right, let's move on to this now. Newly released satellite images are painting a grim picture of China's ongoing battle against the spread of COVID. The images reportedly show larger crowds gathering outside local crematoriums and funeral homes across the country. Now, a new report in the Washington Post is looking into concerns that Beijing is not reporting China's true death toll from this latest wave. Samuel Oakford is here to put this all into perspective. He's a video reporter for the Washington Post and contributed to that report. Samuel, thanks for joining us. So just explain to our viewers, what does your reporting show us?
Good morning, Vlad and Anne-Marie. Thanks for having me on. Our report was an attempt to bridge the gap between what the Chinese government is publicly saying about the death toll tied to the surge in COVID cases currently after their reversal of their zero COVID policy, and what's happening really on the ground. And that what we did was we looked at satellite imagery in a number of cities. We were able to focus on 6 in particular and establish that there were patterns in that satellite imagery that showed more activity, more cars, more people lined up in ways that are abnormal, ways that weren't reflected in old satellite imagery that we looked at. We also examined social media videos that were taken in some of those very same places to confirm what was happening on the ground. And finally, we further confirmed this by speaking with people at these locations that have said that they're overwhelmed, the staff are overwhelmed, and then the mourners themselves are waiting hours to have their loved ones cremated.
So you got a really good snapshot of what we might not necessarily be hearing from Beijing. How does what you guys are reporting vary from what we're hearing from Beijing?
The Beijing government has been very tight-lipped about the actual death toll from this current wave. They use a very narrow, version of what would count as a COVID death. But even taking that into consideration, it's simply too low. It strains belief, right? And if you are an American or someone with a relative right in China, they might tell you what's going on in their area, and they may know people that have died of this. So it just doesn't add up. And I think that the goal of this was to hold the Chinese government accountable. The international community deserves to know generally what's happening right in China, but also the Chinese people deserve to know. We lost a lot of people in the United States ourselves, and to think if the government were to be trying to cover that up, that would be terrible.
You know what, Samuel, this reporting reminds me of what it was like here in New York early, before we had vaccines, right, where it was really, you knew this was a serious situation. But once we started to see morgues needing sort of extra storage facilities, then we realized, hey, a lot of people are dying. Right. It really put the numbers in perspective. Here, we're not getting accurate numbers at all. What are you hearing from people who work in the crematoriums?
Absolutely. I'm in New York, and I definitely was thinking back to what it was like in April, May, and in 2020. What the people at the crematoriums are telling us is that the number of bodies that are coming in it's more than they've ever experienced. Right? They're giving families in some cases only 2 minutes to say goodbye to their loved ones. They said that they've had to stop memorial services, right? So they have to focus just on cremating the bodies in some of these areas. And what that also tells us is that people that appear in these videos that we were able to verify are likely there to handle the remains or have the remains of loved ones who died very recently, right? So they're not trying to set up a memorial service for someone who died a few weeks ago. It's very likely because of the way cremations are handled in China that these people have died in the past few days.
So, there's a question here about response from Beijing, but I mean, they don't respond to Western journalists. I wonder, though, what are they saying to their own citizens?
Yeah, because I'm curious. I mean, part of the reason that we're seeing this spike right now is because of the rapid ending of the zero COVID policy, right? And that was in response to people taking to the streets and demanding something change.
And remember, I said that I thought to myself, and Samuel, you can help me unwind this, which is there was a demand for the Chinese government to end these drastic draconian COVID measures, and people took to the streets in protest of that. And then the Chinese government all of a sudden did a 180 and said, okay, fine, we're not just going to remove the draconian restrictions, we're removing all restrictions.
Yeah,
and then see how you deal with it.
But now people are dying.
Right.
And I imagine if your grandmother has passed away, when your grandmother survived the last 3 years with, COVID, at some point, people are going to see the numbers and they're going to start to put pressure on the Chinese government again.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something we talked to experts about. The Chinese government has obviously very carefully handled the COVID crisis domestically for the past few years, but then did this about face, right, that you just mentioned. It seems that right now the way they're handling it is kind of scattered, right? You'll get some information from local officials that say that case numbers are very high, right? They'll say that, well, actually, a lot of people have been infected, but the mortality rate is low. But at the same time, they're just not admitting to deaths in a way that is at all realistic, right? So I think that, we were trying to bridge that gap here. But also, if someone is only aware of what's happening in their specific area, hopefully it's helpful to know about that this is happening elsewhere too, right, in the country.
Yeah, Samuel Oakford, thank you so much.
Thank you.